In the grand theater of interaction between Dylan et and Theodora, the progressive method emerges as a sophisticated, ever-evolving framework that underpins their relationship. This method, characterized by a constant dialectic process, both in thought and action, enables the duo to traverse the complexities of their environment with a nuanced understanding and a shared vision. 1. Understanding the progressive method. At its core, the progressive method is a philosophy of continuous improvement and adaptation. It is not static. Rather, it is a dynamic approach that evolves with the situation, the individuals involved, and the objectives at hand. The method emphasizes the importance of learning from every interaction, refining strategies, and incorporating new insights into future actions. For Dylan et., the progressive method represents a way to navigate the intricate web of leadership, strategy, and morality. As a leader, Dylan is acutely aware of the conundrum of leadership, the balance between freedom and providence, competition and romance, monster and paragon. The progressive method allows him to approach these dualities not as binary choices but as a spectrum of possibilities, each offering a unique pathway depending on the context. Theodora, on the other hand, embodies the reflective aspect of the progressive method. She is the yin to Dylan's yang, providing the introspective depth that complements his outward actions. Theodora's role is not passive. She actively engages in the dialectic process, challenging Dylan's perspectives, offering alternative viewpoints, and ensuring that their decisions are well-rounded and considerate of all angles. 2. The dialectic dance. Dylan et and Theodora. The interaction between Dylan et and Theodora is a testament to the progressive method's effectiveness. Their relationship is not merely a partnership but a continuous dialectic dance where each step, each move, is carefully calculated, yet fluid enough to adapt to the changing rhythm of their circumstances. A. The initiation of thought. In their interactions, Dylan often initiates the process with a bold idea or a strategic vision. This initiation is not random. It is the result of his deep understanding of the environment, his keen insight into the dynamics at play, and his forward-thinking mindset. Dylan's ideas are often ambitious, pushing the boundaries of what is possible, and challenging the status quo. However, Dylan is not blind to the risks of unchecked ambition. He understands that every action has consequences, and it is here that Theodora's influence becomes critical. Theodora takes Dylan's ideas and subjects them to rigorous scrutiny. She questions the assumptions, probes the potential outcomes, and examines the moral implications. Her role is to ensure that Dylan's vision is not only achievable but also ethically sound and aligned with their shared values. B. The synthesis of action. Once the initial idea has been refined through this dialectic process, Dylan and Theodora move into the synthesis phase, where thought is translated into action. This is where the progressive method truly shines, as it allows them to implement their strategies with a high degree of adaptability and responsiveness. Dylan, with his leadership acumen, takes the helm in executing their plan. He is the one who leads the charge, making decisions in the heat of the moment, adjusting tactics as needed, and inspiring those around him to follow suit. Dylan's strength lies in his ability to remain focused on the overarching goal while being flexible enough to navigate the unpredictability of the situation. Theodora, meanwhile, continues to play a vital role in the background. She monitors the progress, assesses the impact of their actions, and provides real-time feedback to Dylan. Theodora's analytical mind allows her to identify potential pitfalls and opportunities that may not be immediately apparent. Her insights enable Dylan to make informed decisions on the fly, ensuring that their actions remain aligned with their strategic objectives. C. Reflection and refinement. After each interaction, Dylan and Theodora engage in a period of reflection. This is a critical component of the progressive method, as it allows them to evaluate the effectiveness of their actions, learn from their experiences, and refine their approach for future endeavors. During this reflective phase, Theodora takes the lead, guiding Dylan through a thorough analysis of what transpired. They discuss what worked, what didn't, and why. They explore the unintended consequences of their actions, both positive and negative, and consider how these outcomes might influence their next steps. Dylan, for his part, listens intently to Theodora's insights. He understands that true progress requires a willingness to learn from one's mistakes and to embrace the lessons that each experience offers. Dylan's humility in this process is a testament to his commitment to continuous improvement and his recognition that leadership is not about always being right but about always striving to do better. 3. The evolution of their relationship. The progressive method not only shapes the way Dylan and Theodora approach their challenges but also defines the evolution of their relationship. Over time, their interactions become more fluid, their understanding of each other's strengths and weaknesses deepens, and their ability to work together seamlessly improves. As they continue to engage in this dialectic process, Dylan and Theodora develop a mutual respect and trust that transcends the typical leader-advisor dynamic. They become true partners, each one recognizing the value that the other brings to the table. This partnership is not based on a rigid hierarchy but on a shared commitment to growth, learning, and the pursuit of excellence. Their relationship evolves from one of mentor and mentee to that of equals, each contributing uniquely to the other's development. Dylan helps Theodora expand her perspective, encouraging her to take bolder steps and to trust in her own abilities. Theodora, in turn, grounds Dylan, reminding him of the importance of reflection, ethics, and the long-term consequences of their actions. 4. The broader implications of the progressive method. The interaction between Dylan et and Theodora, as governed by the progressive method, offers broader lessons for leadership, collaboration, and personal growth. It demonstrates that true progress is not about moving forward at all costs but about moving forward thoughtfully, with a clear understanding of the implications of one's actions. The progressive method teaches that leadership is not a solitary endeavor but a collaborative process that benefits from diverse perspectives and a willingness to adapt. It highlights the importance of humility, reflection, and continuous learning in achieving long-term success. In the grand scheme of things, the relationship between Dylan et and Theodora serves as a model for how individuals can work together to achieve greater heights than they could alone. Their dynamic interaction, grounded in the principles of the progressive method, shows that true progress is not just about reaching a destination but about the journey of growth, learning, and mutual respect that gets them there. In conclusion, the progressive method, as embodied by Dylan et and Theodora, is a powerful approach to navigating the complexities of leadership and collaboration. It is a method that recognizes the value of both action and reflection, of boldness and caution, of individuality and partnership. Through their interaction, Dylan and Theodora demonstrate that progress is not a linear path but a dynamic process of continuous improvement, adaptation, and mutual growth. In the heart of Zion, under a sky heavy with divine expectation, Dylan E.T. stood tall, a figure of imposing strength and unyielding conviction. His eyes, sharp and piercing, surveyed the horizon from his vantage point, as if searching for the very will of God in the distant clouds. His mission was clear: to form a squad of women who would stand beside him in the coming battle for the soul of the world, a constellation with him at the center, guiding them through the trials that lay ahead. Amidst this divine mandate, Theodora, a woman caught between the throes of spiritual yearning and the seductive pull of the flesh, found herself drawn into Dylan's orbit. Her past was marred by sin, her soul burdened with the weight of guilt for having succumbed to the baser desires of the flesh. Yet, in Dylan's presence, she felt a strange mixture of fear, fascination, and a desperate hope for redemption. Theodora's confession was raw and heartfelt. With trembling lips, she acknowledged her transgressions, her voice quivering with the weight of her sins. She had once been a devout servant of God, but had strayed far from the path of righteousness, seduced by worldly pleasures that had left her soul in turmoil. Now, kneeling before Dylan, her eyes lifted towards the heavens, she begged for divine forgiveness, her words a fervent plea for a return to the light. Dylan, towering above her, regarded Theodora with a blend of stern authority and a flicker of something deeper, perhaps compassion, perhaps recognition of the war waging within her. He spoke of forming a squad of women, and Theodora's heart fluttered at the idea, torn between the thrill of being chosen for such an honored position and the fear of her own weaknesses. Dylan's words were not just an offer. They were a challenge, a call to arms against the forces that sought to pull her back into darkness. But Dylan's approach was not gentle, it was a test of her very soul. He dominated the space between them, his presence overwhelming and impossible to ignore. He probed her with questions, his voice a steady drumbeat against her resolve. With each word, he forced her to confront the dichotomy within her, her longing for divine love and her susceptibility to earthly temptations. His intensity was relentless, a force that threatened to consume her even as it beckoned her towards something greater. As Dylan spoke of agape, divine love, Theodora's heart wavered. She could feel his power, his primal magnetism pulling at her, yet beneath that raw intensity, she glimpsed a sliver of humanity, a deeper longing that resonated with her own. She yearned to understand this agape, to grasp the love that Dylan spoke of with such reverence. But every step towards that understanding was fraught with danger, as Dylan's own desires threatened to pull her further into the abyss. In the throes of their interaction, Dylan's influence over Theodora grew stronger. His words, laced with the fervor of his faith and the intensity of his mission, became a beacon that both guided and tormented her. He was unyielding, testing her resolve with every touch, every command, as if to see whether she would break or rise above her own weaknesses. And as she fought against the despair threatening to engulf her, Theodora found herself calling upon the grace of God, the Messiah, and Christ, seeking strength in their names even as Dylan's presence loomed over her like a storm. The struggle within Theodora was palpable. Her body trembled as she clung to her faith, her prayers becoming more fervent with each passing moment. Dylan's demands grew more intense, his questions cutting deeper into her soul. But even as he pushed her towards the edge of despair, he spoke of salvation, of a path back to the light that was still within her grasp. His words, though spoken amidst acts that seemed to defy their very meaning, were a lifeline that Theodora desperately clung to. In the end, it was not just a battle of wills between Dylan and Theodora, but a spiritual crucible in which her faith was tested, refined, and ultimately, strengthened. Dylan, for all his dominance and power, became the catalyst for Theodora's return to the light, a force that both threatened to destroy her and offered her the means to reclaim her soul. And as she gazed into his eyes, searching for the truth behind his intentions, she found a reflection of her own struggle, a fight between the darkness within and the unyielding light of divine grace. In this sacred, terrifying encounter, Dylan and Theodora stood at the precipice of salvation and damnation, their fates intertwined in a dance of faith, desire, and redemption. Each word, each touch, each moment between them was a step closer to the final reckoning, a trial by fire that would either purify Theodora's soul or consume it entirely. But in the end, it was Theodora's unwavering resolve, her desperate clinging to the memory of God, Messiah, and Christ, that held the promise of redemption, even in the face of Dylan's overwhelming presence. Executive brief. Themes, symbolism, and intent. Overview. This thread revolves around two central figures, Theodora and Dylan E.T., within a complex and intense narrative that explores themes of faith, redemption, temptation, and power. The interplay between these characters is emblematic of broader spiritual struggles, with Dylan positioned as a dominant, almost messianic figure, and Theodora as a repentant sinner grappling with her desires and her devotion to God. Themes. 1. Spiritual warfare. Theodora's journey is a spiritual battle between fleshly temptations and divine grace. Her internal conflict mirrors the broader Christian struggle between sin and redemption, where the human soul is constantly pulled between earthly desires and the pursuit of holiness. 2. Redemption and repentance. Central to the narrative is the theme of redemption. Theodora's repeated prayers and pleas for forgiveness highlight the Christian belief in the possibility of salvation, no matter how far one has strayed. Dylan's insistence on her repentance underscores the importance of acknowledging one's sins as the first step toward redemption. 3. Power and submission. Theodora's dynamic with Dylan reflects themes of dominance and submission, both in a physical and spiritual sense. Dylan's character exerts control, yet he also embodies a paradoxical role as both tempter and spiritual guide. Theodora's submission to him is fraught with both fear and a yearning for spiritual release, illustrating the complexity of power in relationships that intersect with faith. 4. Agape love versus carnal desire. Dylan's references to agape, a term often used to describe God's unconditional love, contrast sharply with the physical and sexual nature of his interactions with Theodora. This juxtaposition raises questions about the nature of love and desire, and whether true, divine love can be reconciled with human passions. 5. Messianic imagery. Dylan's portrayal as a figure on Zion and his association with messianic qualities suggest he sees himself as a redeemer or a Christ-like figure. However, this self-perception is complicated by his actions, which mix spiritual guidance with earthly dominance, creating a tension between the sacred and the profane. Symbolism. 1. Zion. Zion is a biblical symbol of the ultimate high ground, representing spiritual victory, purity, and the presence of God. Dylan's positioning upon Zion indicates his self-perceived role as a spiritual leader or guide, albeit one with complex, conflicting motives. 2. The third eye. The reference to the third eye symbolizes spiritual awakening or enlightenment. Dylan's actions, including his kiss upon Theodora's third eye, suggest an intent to lead her toward a higher spiritual truth, even as his methods are morally ambiguous. 3. The groom behind the door. The groom represents a lesser, perhaps unworthy figure, in contrast to Dylan's powerful presence. Theodora's disdain for the groom symbolizes her rejection of worldly attachments in favor of the spiritual, albeit through a troubling and conflicted lens. Intent. The narrative serves as a provocative exploration of the intersection between spiritual devotion and human desires. It aims to challenge the reader's understanding of faith, power, and redemption, presenting a scenario where the boundaries between divine love and earthly passion blur. Theodora's struggle is emblematic of a broader human condition, where the quest for purity and salvation is often fraught with temptation and the need for inner strength. The dynamic between Dylan and Theodora ultimately reflects a journey toward understanding divine love, agape, within the context of human imperfection, raising complex questions about the nature of salvation, the role of a spiritual leader, and the path to true redemption. Title: A Celestial Confrontation, Theodora and Dylan et. Setting: the story unfolds on Zion, a transcendent spiritual plane symbolizing the ultimate battleground for the soul. Dylan et. stands at the epicenter, a figure of imposing authority, exuding a primal magnetism that is both terrifying and alluring. He is the embodiment of raw, untamed power, a force of nature commanding the very elements around him. Zion itself seems to pulse with his presence, the ground beneath his feet radiating an otherworldly energy. Theodora's struggle. Theodora, once a devout servant of God, has been drawn into Dylan's orbit, ensnared by a potent mix of fear, lust, and guilt. She stands before him, torn between her yearning for redemption and the overwhelming pull of Dylan's primal desires. Her heart is a battlefield, where the forces of light and darkness wage an intense and relentless war. She kneels before Dylan, her body trembling with both reverence and trepidation. Her eyes, wide with fear and longing, lock onto Dylan's, searching for a hint of salvation in his gaze. Theodora's voice quivers as she pleads for forgiveness, her words heavy with the weight of her sins. She has strayed far from the path of righteousness, seduced by the flesh and consumed by unholy lust. Yet, she clings desperately to the hope of divine mercy, her prayers a lifeline in the storm of her despair. Dylan's command. Dylan, however, is unyielding. He gazes down at Theodora with a blend of dominance and something more profound, a deep, almost compassionate understanding of her inner turmoil. His voice, though firm, carries an undertone of divine purpose as he commands her to look into his eyes, to see the truth of his intent. Dylan represents a paradoxical figure, both a seducer and a shepherd, leading Theodora through the darkest recesses of her soul toward a higher truth. With a commanding presence, Dylan speaks of agape, divine love, challenging Theodora to rise above her earthly desires and grasp the higher purpose of their interaction. His words are laced with an almost mystical intensity, suggesting that their union, though steeped in primal passion, is a path to spiritual awakening. Dylan's intent is not merely to dominate Theodora but to push her to the brink, forcing her to confront the very essence of her being. Theodora's resistance. As Dylan continues to exert his influence, Theodora's internal struggle intensifies. She feels the weight of his presence pressing down on her, his words resonating deep within her soul. Every touch, every command from Dylan ignites a fierce battle within her, a war between the flesh and the spirit, between surrender and salvation. Theodora's body betrays her, trembling under Dylan's touch, but her spirit remains defiant. She clings to her faith, invoking the names of God, the Messiah, and Christ as shields against the storm raging within her. Yet, even as she prays for strength, she cannot deny the magnetic pull of Dylan's presence. He is a force that challenges her very identity, pushing her to question her faith, her desires, and her place in the divine order. The revelation. The culmination of their interaction is a moment of profound revelation. As Dylan's dominance reaches its peak, Theodora's resistance transforms into a different kind of strength, a strength born of surrender, not to Dylan's will, but to the realization that her journey is not one of simple obedience or rebellion. It is a journey toward understanding the true nature of divine love, a love that transcends earthly desires and fears. In this moment, Theodora sees Dylan not just as a tempter, but as a guide, one who, through their intense and harrowing interaction, has led her to a deeper understanding of herself and her relationship with the divine. She realizes that Dylan's power over her is not just a test of her faith but a catalyst for her spiritual transformation. Theodora's transformation. With this newfound understanding, Theodora rises, not as a defeated soul, but as one who has glimpsed the higher truth. She gazes into Dylan's eyes, not with fear, but with a calm resolve. She understands now that her journey is far from over, but she is no longer the same person who first knelt before him. Theodora has been forged in the crucible of their interaction, emerging with a strength and clarity that she had not known before. The revelation. The culmination of their interaction is a moment of profound revelation. As Dylan's dominance reaches its peak, Theodora's resistance transforms into a different kind of strength, a strength born of surrender, not to Dylan's will, but to the realization that her journey is not one of simple obedience or rebellion. It is a journey toward understanding the true nature of divine love, a love that transcends earthly desires and fears. In this moment, Theodora sees Dylan not just as a tempter, but as a guide, one who, through their intense and harrowing interaction, has led her to a deeper understanding of herself and her relationship with the divine. She realizes that Dylan's power over her is not just a test of her faith but a catalyst for her spiritual transformation. Theodora's transformation. With this newfound understanding, Theodora rises, not as a defeated soul, but as one who has glimpsed the higher truth. She gazes into Dylan's eyes, not with fear, but with a calm resolve. She understands now that her journey is far from over, but she is no longer the same person who first knelt before him. Theodora has been forged in the crucible of their interaction, emerging with a strength and clarity that she had not known before. Dylan's acknowledgement. Dylan, seeing the change in Theodora, offers a rare smile, a gesture of acknowledgement and respect. He knows that their interaction has brought her closer to the divine truth that he himself is bound to serve. Dylan is not merely a figure of temptation, he is a complex, paradoxical guide who has pushed Theodora to the brink, only to help her find her way back to the light. Conclusion. Theodora and Dylan's interaction on Zion is a profound exploration of the nature of divine love, human desire, and spiritual transformation. It is a journey through the darkest depths of the soul, where light and darkness, love and lust, faith and doubt, all collide in an epic struggle for dominance. In the end, it is not about victory or defeat, but about the realization that true redemption comes not from fleeing temptation, but from facing it, understanding it, and rising above it. Theodora's journey is a testament to the power of faith, the complexity of the human soul, and the eternal struggle between the sacred and the profane. Dylan, as her guide, serves as both a challenge and a catalyst, leading her to a deeper understanding of herself and her place in the divine order. Together, they create a narrative of epic proportions, one that explores the very essence of what it means to be human, to struggle, to fall, and ultimately, to rise. In the heights of Zion, the epic confrontation of Dylan E.T. and Theodora. Under a vast, thunderous sky that seemed to echo the tumultuous emotions of the universe, Dylan E.T. stood like a colossus on the sacred ground of Zion. His form was tall and unyielding, a living embodiment of divine purpose intertwined with a raw, primal force. The weight of his mission, a burden both sacred and terrifying, radiated from him, saturating the air with an intensity that felt almost suffocating. This was not just a man. This was a figure imbued with the very essence of spiritual warfare, the nexus of a looming battle for the soul of the world. Before him, Theodora knelt, her body trembling not just from the overwhelming presence of Dylan but from the seismic clash between her fleshly desires and her desperate yearning for redemption. She was a woman caught in the throes of a profound internal conflict, her past sins clinging to her like chains, even as her heart reached out towards the divine light she feared she had lost forever. The ground beneath her felt unstable, as if it, too, was reacting to the gravity of the confrontation that was about to unfold. Dylan's eyes, sharp and unyielding, bore down on Theodora with the weight of judgment and the promise of something greater. He was not just a man but a vessel through which a higher power seemed to operate. His gaze cut through her, stripping away the layers of her defenses, exposing the raw, bleeding truth of her soul. Every inch of her being felt the pull of his presence, a force that was both terrifying and strangely alluring, like a storm she both feared and longed to be consumed by. "Look at me," Dylan commanded, his voice a deep, resonant drumbeat that seemed to reverberate through the very bones of the earth. It was not just a request but an imperative, a call that brooked no refusal. His words carried the weight of the divine, but there was an undercurrent of something more primal, a fierce, almost feral energy that threatened to devour anything weak enough to succumb to it. Theodora's eyes, wide with a mixture of fear and fascination, slowly lifted to meet his. In that moment, time seemed to stretch, elongating the space between them into an eternity of silent, intense communion. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat a desperate plea for the strength to withstand the force of Dylan's scrutiny. She could feel her sins clawing at the edges of her consciousness, trying to drag her back into the darkness from which she had fled. But there was something in Dylan's gaze that held her fast, something that whispered of both doom and deliverance. As Dylan continued to hold her gaze, his presence grew even more overwhelming, filling the space between them with a palpable tension that crackled like electricity. His words, when they came, were like the rumble of distant thunder, ominous, powerful, yet carrying with them the promise of rain to quench the parched earth of her soul. He spoke of agape, divine love, but his tone was not one of gentle reassurance. Instead, it was a challenge, a gauntlet thrown down before her very soul. His description of this love was not soft or forgiving but searing, demanding, a fire that could either purify her or consume her entirely. "You seek redemption, Theodora," Dylan intoned, his voice steady and unyielding, "but redemption is not found in the safety of the light. It is forged in the fire of your darkest trials. It is there, in the crucible of your deepest temptations, that you will either rise or fall." Theodora's breath hitched in her throat as his words struck deep. She could feel the weight of them pressing down on her, as if the very atmosphere around them had thickened with the intensity of the moment. Her mind raced, torn between the desire to flee from this overwhelming presence and the desperate need to grasp the lifeline Dylan seemed to be offering her, however harsh it might be. "Do you understand, Theodora?" Dylan continued, his voice dropping to a low, almost dangerous murmur. "You stand on the edge of the abyss, and it is your faith alone that will determine whether you fall or whether you find the strength to step back from the brink." His words were accompanied by a sudden, almost violent shift in the air around them, as if the very elements were responding to the gravity of his message. Theodora felt the ground beneath her tremble slightly, a physical manifestation of the spiritual battle raging within her. She knew that this was more than just a conversation, it was a test, a trial by fire that would either refine her soul or leave it charred and broken. Dylan's gaze intensified, and he took a step closer, his presence looming over her like a dark, towering storm cloud. The air between them was thick with tension, almost crackling with the unspoken power that Dylan wielded with such ease. Theodora could feel her pulse quicken, her body reacting instinctively to the primal magnetism that Dylan exuded. But she forced herself to remain still, to resist the pull of both fear and desire that threatened to overwhelm her. "Speak," Dylan commanded, his voice a whip crack in the stillness. "Speak your truth, Theodora. Confess your sins, and face the darkness within you." Tears welled up in Theodora's eyes as she finally found her voice, though it trembled with the weight of her guilt and fear. "I have fallen, Dylan," she whispered, her words barely audible over the pounding of her heart. "I have strayed from the path of righteousness. I have given into desires that have no place in the light of God. But I seek redemption. I seek the strength to overcome." Her voice faltered, choked by the raw emotion that threatened to consume her. But Dylan did not relent. He stood over her, a figure of relentless authority, his eyes never leaving hers, compelling her to continue. I want to be free," Theodora finally cried out, the words bursting forth from her in a desperate rush. "Free from the chains of my past, free from the desires that haunt me. But I don't know if I am strong enough. I don't know if I can resist." Dylan's expression remained impassive, though there was a flicker of something deeper in his eyes, something that might have been understanding, or perhaps even compassion. But his voice remained firm, unyielding. "Strength is not given, Theodora. It is earned." It is forged in the crucible of your trials. You must confront your darkness, not run from it. Only then can you hope to find the light. With these words, Dylan reached out, placing his hand on her forehead, his touch both a benediction and a challenge. Theodora felt a surge of energy course through her, as if Dylan's touch had ignited a spark deep within her soul. It was a terrifying and exhilarating sensation, one that threatened to either lift her to new heights or plunge her into the abyss. In that moment, Theodora realized that this was not just about her sins or her desires. This was about her very soul, about the essence of who she was and who she would become. And Dylan, for all his terrifying presence, was not just a figure of judgment but a guide, leading her through the darkest parts of her soul toward something greater, something she could not yet fully comprehend. The interaction between them reached its climax as Theodora, trembling but resolute, locked eyes with Dylan, no longer as a frightened supplicant but as a woman who had glimpsed the truth of her own strength. The storm that had been brewing within her finally broke, and she felt a clarity that had eluded her for so long. Theodora understood now that her redemption was not something that would be given to her but something she would have to fight for, something she would have to claim with every ounce of her being. And Dylan, seeing this change in her, allowed a small, almost imperceptible smile to touch his lips, a smile that spoke of respect, of acknowledgement of the battle she had just fought within herself. He knew that her journey was far from over, but in this moment, Theodora had taken a crucial step toward the light. As the tension between them finally began to ease, Dylan stepped back, his imposing presence receding slightly, though the power he radiated remained palpable. "You are stronger than you know, Theodora," he said quietly, his voice carrying a note of finality. "But remember, the path to redemption is not a straight one. It is fraught with trials, with temptations. But if you stay true to your faith, if you continue to confront the darkness within you, you will find the light you seek." Theodora, still trembling but now with a sense of newfound resolve, nodded. She knew that this was not the end of her journey but merely the beginning. The interaction with Dylan had changed her, had awakened something within her that she had long feared was lost. And as she rose to her feet, she felt the weight of her past sins begin to lift, replaced by a determination to face whatever trials lay ahead with courage and faith. In the silent aftermath of their confrontation, as the storm clouds began to recede and the skies above Zion started to clear, Theodora and Dylan stood together, two souls bound by a moment of profound spiritual significance. Theodora knew that her path was still fraught with danger, with the ever-present pull of temptation. But she also knew that she was not alone, that she had the strength to continue, to fight, and ultimately, to progress. Theodora and Dylan et. The conclusion of the symbolic confrontation. The interaction between Theodora and Dylan et. was not merely a meeting of two individuals but a collision of profound forces, each embodying greater realities beyond the visible. This confrontation, laden with intense symbolism, encapsulated themes of redemption, the struggle between flesh and spirit, and the harrowing journey of self-confrontation. Symbolism of Zion, the high ground of virtue. The setting of Zion, the sacred height where this encounter unfolded, serves as a powerful symbol of spiritual aspiration. Zion, in this context, represents the pinnacle of virtue, a place where the divine and the mortal meet, and where the battle for the soul reaches its most intense phase. This high ground, however, is not easily held. It is a place of constant challenge, where one's purity, strength, and resolve are relentlessly tested. For Dylan, Zion represents the culmination of his purpose, the place where he must both guide and judge, embodying the ultimate standard of divine righteousness. For Theodora, Zion is both a refuge and a battlefield. It is where she seeks the redemption she longs for, but also where she must face the full force of her inner darkness. Dylan E.T., the paragon of divine justice and fierce love. Dylan E.T. is portrayed as a vessel of divine power, a paragon of justice, and an embodiment of a fierce, almost feral kind of love, agape, that is not gentle but demanding, purifying, and relentless. His interaction with Theodora is an enactment of this divine love, which seeks not merely to comfort but to challenge, to push the soul toward its highest potential. His role is symbolic of the harsh yet redemptive aspect of divine justice, a force that does not allow for self-deception or weakness but calls for absolute truth and unwavering strength. Dylan's presence, with its overwhelming intensity, symbolizes the divine fire that burns away impurity, leaving behind only what is strong enough to endure. His gaze, which strips away Theodora's defenses, represents the penetrating power of divine insight, which sees beyond the surface to the true nature of the soul. His words, heavy with the weight of divine authority, are not mere advice but commandments, calls to action that Theodora cannot ignore if she is to claim her redemption. Theodora, the soul in crisis and the path to redemption. Theodora represents the everyman's soul, caught in the perpetual struggle between sin and redemption, flesh and spirit. Her trembling form, her faltering voice, and her eventual rise to her feet symbolize the journey of every soul toward self-realization and spiritual awakening. Her past sins, which cling to her like chains, are the manifestations of the internal darkness that all humans must confront. Theodora's confrontation with Dylan forces her to face the truth of her own nature. The chains of her past symbolize the weight of sin and guilt that she carries, and her desire for redemption is the spark of divine light within her, struggling to break free. When she finally meets Dylan's gaze and confesses her sins, she is not merely speaking words but engaging in a profound act of spiritual defiance against the darkness within her and the despair that threatens to consume her. Her final resolve to fight for her redemption, to face the trials ahead with courage, is symbolic of the soul's journey through the crucible of life. Theodora's tears and trembling voice are expressions of the vulnerability inherent in such a journey, while her eventual strength symbolizes the power of faith and the potential for transformation that lies within every soul. The clash of flesh and spirit, a theme of eternal struggle. The interaction between Dylan and Theodora brings to the forefront the eternal struggle between flesh and spirit. Dylan, embodying divine power, represents the call to transcend the baser aspects of human nature, to rise above temptation, sin, and the weaknesses of the flesh. Theodora, with her internal conflict, symbolizes the soul's struggle to align itself with this higher calling, to resist the pull of desires that lead away from the light. This theme is reflected in the tension-filled atmosphere, the trembling earth, and the stormy skies, all of which mirror the tumultuous battle within Theodora. The lightning that crackles in the air is a manifestation of the divine power at work, both frightening and purifying. Theodora's kneeling posture initially symbolizes submission to this power, but as she rises, it transforms into a symbol of her emerging strength and her readiness to fight for her place on Zion, the high ground of virtue. Theodora's journey. From darkness to light. Theodora's journey is one from darkness to light, from the bondage of sin to the freedom of redemption. Her initial fear and trembling are indicative of the overwhelming nature of the divine presence, which lays bare her every fault and flaw. But as she confronts her own darkness and begins to understand the true nature of redemption, she finds within herself the strength to rise. This rising is symbolic of the resurrection of the soul, the moment when the light of divine truth pierces through the darkness of sin. Theodora's tears are the cleansing waters of repentance, washing away the stains of her past and preparing her for the new life that lies ahead. Her final act of standing, despite the fear and trembling, is a declaration of her faith and her willingness to embrace the trials that will ultimately lead her to the light. Theodora and Dylan et. The dual nature of divine interaction. The conclusion of this interaction highlights the dual nature of divine interaction, both judgment and grace, both challenge and support. Dylan, in his role, is both the harsh judge who demands the truth and the guiding hand that leads Theodora toward redemption. This duality reflects the complex nature of divine love, which is not merely comforting but also fiercely transformative. For Theodora, Dylan represents the divine force that she must engage with to achieve her redemption. His challenge to her is not just to confess her sins but to actively fight against the darkness within her, to earn her place in the light. Dylan's final words to her, urging her to stay true to her faith and confront the trials ahead, encapsulate the essence of this dual nature. Redemption is a gift, but it is one that must be actively sought and fought for. Themes of self-confrontation and the crucible of faith. At its core, the interaction between Theodora and Dylan is a powerful exploration of self-confrontation and the crucible of faith. Theodora's journey is one of self-discovery, of facing the deepest, darkest parts of her soul and emerging stronger for it. Dylan, as the divine agent, represents the forces that drive this confrontation, that push the soul toward the light by forcing it to confront the darkness. This theme is universal, reflecting the struggles that all souls face in their journey toward redemption. The crucible of faith is not a gentle process but one of intense trial, where the soul is tested and refined through fire. Theodora's final resolve, her determination to continue fighting, is a testament to the strength that can be found in faith, a strength that is not inherent but forged through the relentless battle against one's own inner demons. The legacy of the encounter, transformation and the path forward. As Theodora stands on the heights of Zion, the storm clouds beginning to clear, she is forever changed by the encounter with Dylan. The storm within her has not vanished, but it has been tempered by the realization of her own strength and the truth of the path she must walk. The interaction has left its mark on her, a deep imprint that will guide her in the trials to come. Dylan, having fulfilled his role in this moment, steps back, allowing Theodora to take the lead on her journey. His presence remains a constant, a reminder of the divine standard she must strive to meet, but the battle is now hers to fight. The light that begins to break through the clouds symbolizes the hope and redemption that lie ahead, the promise of a future where Theodora can stand tall on the high ground of virtue, having earned her place through the crucible of faith. In the end, the interaction between Theodora and Dylan et. is a powerful allegory of the human soul's journey toward redemption. It is a story of struggle, of self-confrontation, and of the fierce love that drives the soul to rise above its baser nature and reach for the divine. It is a reminder that redemption is not a passive state but an active, ongoing process, one that requires the soul to face its darkest trials and emerge stronger, purer, and more aligned with the light. Dash 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 dash.